that wasn't possible. And Wilson and I'll take a rain check on that. And I'd like to also acknowledge my friend Dan Scully. Dan and I had a chance with our wives to spend time with each other on the Mediterranean cruise. And I got a chance to know him. And I host a jazz show, World Class Jazz, every Sunday on the radio. You can listen on the internet. And Dan has become a fan of my show, so I like that very much. It's also my honor to be on the program with Chief Justice Bridget McCormick, who has distinguished herself in the academic world, being the Dean of Michigan Law School and being the outstanding Chief Justice of Michigan Supreme Court. Also like to acknowledge Reginald Turner. Reggie Turner is a person that I've seen starting out as a young lawyer and watched him rise in leadership in the National Bar Association like his mentor, Dennis Archer, and in the ABA as like his mentor, Dennis Archer, to become president-elect. And he's an outstanding lawyer. My wife and I spent a lot of time planning what the ABOTA year would be like in 2020. We had meetings planned for Charleston, for Montreal, and Seattle, Washington. And year didn't turn out quite like we thought. We got off to a good start in Charleston with our meeting there and our leadership conference. Bob and Tom were there. We tried to make the leadership conference interesting. We did a ABOTA Jeopardy with cocktails, and we had a wonderful activity in the afternoon, a team building activity, which involved a mixology contest where the team members tried to make the best alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks, and we had jazz and had it in a historic setting. At that meeting, I talked a little bit about what I wanted my year to be like. As you know, we increased the dues last year from $500 to $750, which actually put us in line with other peer organizations like ABOTA. But I created a newly revised Financial Accountability and Responsibility Committee to take a deep look at our finances every year and to make sure that we were on the right track and we never got in a situation where we went 13 years without increasing dues or decreasing dues. And they've done outstanding work. We also introduced a program that I'm very proud of, that my wife and I created. It's called the Civics Education I'm getting the wrong words, but it's the Civics Education Literacy Program. And the concept is to have ABOTA members go into schools and read books to early childhood kids, kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, about civics. We know that our kids don't know what they should know about civics, and it's so important that they do now. Obviously, our program was affected by the pandemic, but we've created videos that you can share with the schools, and we sent books to all the ABOTA chapters around the country. So we hope that you will embrace our civics education literacy project, and we think it has a lot of value. Also, I served on 2 terms on the board of the National Center for State Courts, and we partnered with them to do a jury, a video on jury service. It's called Explainer Video. It's a black and white video, and we'll show that to you now.
Jury service is one of the most unique privileges of being an American citizen. In fact, it is so important to our democracy that it's mentioned 3 times in our Constitution. Jury trials form the backbone of our justice system, providing everyone the right to have charges against them decided by a jury selected from their community. How do you become a juror? A person must be a U.S. citizen and a resident of the geographic area served by the court to be eligible for jury service. If you've ever voted, driven a vehicle, held a state ID, paid taxes, or received public benefits, you may be called for jury service. Courts randomly pull names from these lists to ensure the jury pool reflects the demographic diversity of their communities. This random selection process also ensures that jurors cannot be handpicked by the judge or the lawyers to try to reach a particular outcome. Once your name is selected, in most jurisdictions, you'll receive a summons requiring you to appear in court on a specific day, where you'll be placed in a jury pool for a particular case. The judge and attorneys ask questions to determine if you can be fair to both sides and listen to all the evidence before making up your mind. With nearly 150,000 jury trials taking place in state courts each year, and 5,000 more in federal courts, there's a real need for jurors. Nearly 2/3 of Americans live in communities with a one-day or one-trial system, meaning jurors report for service and are either selected to serve on a jury for one trial or they're released after one day. And of course, all courts prohibit discrimination in jury service based on gender, race, ethnicity or national origin, religion, and physical disability. So, if you're selected, what happens next? The fate of a defendant being found guilty or not guilty in a criminal case, or liable or not liable in a civil case, rests in the hands of the jury. While the judge determines what evidence can be allowed in the courtroom and outlines the legal rules that jurors must follow, the jurors determine the facts and who should win the case based on those facts. This is why it's crucial for every member of the jury to listen, really listen, to all the evidence being presented. It's an honor and a privilege to enjoy the benefits of American citizenship. Not much is asked of us in return. But serving on juries is an important part of our obligation to our fellow citizens and to our country. And by serving, you will personally have a hand in ensuring justice in our courts. Thank you for doing your part.
One of the things that you'll notice about that video is that it really reflects the diversity of our country. I personally worked on it. We worked really hard to make sure that that was reflected. And we even looked at the music very closely on the video. When we had the meeting in Charleston, we had a wonderful speaker, Judge Richard Gergel, who spoke about his book, Unexampled Courage, The Blinding of Sergeant Isaac Woodard Jr. and the Awakening of President Harry Truman and Judge Wady's Waring. This was a wonderful book and very timely. It was about an African-American soldier in uniform who returned home to the state of South Carolina. He wanted to use the bathroom and the bus driver got mad, complained to the police chief, who took out his billy club and blinded him with the beating. There was a trial in federal court. The police chief was found not guilty. It had a profound effect on the judge, Judge Wady's Waring. He became one of the most celebrated civil rights judges in the South. He wrote a dissenting opinion in the Clarendon County case, which became a part of the case of Brown v. Board of Education. His opinion was really adopted as the majority opinion in Brown. Judge Waring was ostracized and run out of town and moved to New York. Judge Harry Truman was so affected by what happened that he issued an executive order integrating the Army. We've put the complete transcript of Judge Gergel's speech on the ABOTA website. You can order the book through Amazon. Judge Gergel has been speaking all over the country about this book, received great reviews, Washington Post and New York Times. A side note, Senator Ernest Hollings, before he died recently, asked that his name be taken off of the federal courthouse in Charleston, that it be named for Judge Wady's Waring, and the change was made. How many senators take their names off of federal courthouses? After the Charleston trip, we had a wonderful international trip to Rwanda. Some went for gorilla trekking there, to Tanzania for Main Safari, and to Zanzibar for beach on the Indian Ocean. My wife and I, Judy and I, returned on March 12th, and everything was changing in this country. It was the day before the European travel ban went into effect. Shortly thereafter, I issued a statement on behalf of ABOTA, asking ABOTA members to embrace technology, to use a little known thing at that time called Zoom to do depositions and other hearings. And I also asked that we be civil to each other, that we embrace technology and embrace civility. After that also, I appointed a COVID-19 task force chaired by Steve Quattlebaum, who's our vice president-elect of ABOTA. Great lawyers from all over the country, scientists and judges. This group met for 5 weeks and issued a COVID-19 white paper which I believe is one of the finest documents ABOTA has ever produced. It has been used as a plan and a tool by judges and courts around the country. It's available to you. ABOTA lawyers have sent it to their courts. In connection with that, I appointed a committee that planned a wonderful seminar called Conducting Jury Trials in the Age of Pandemics. We had 775 people attend the webinar. We had jury consultants, we had judges, court administrators. One of our speakers tonight, our speaker, Chief Justice McCormick, was one of the judges who appeared on the program. As we all know, on May 20th, George Floyd was killed. And that killing had a profound effect on this country. And in response to that, I gave a lot of thought and consideration about a statement. And I wrote a statement that was published, and it was called Now is the Time, an Inflection Point to Equal Justice. And in it, I asked ABOTA members to embrace the moment, to be people of goodwill, and to try to be agents for change because of what happened. My statement, I think, was accepted and widely accepted. The South Carolina Trial Lawyers Association published it as their cover story for their publication this summer, their summer publication. Also, in addition to that, we've had a lot of criticism of judges around the country. And we issued 2 statements defending the judiciary, and they appreciated it very much that we did that. As your president, I've had the opportunity to travel around the country and to meet with various chapters. But we've also had some great seminars this year. I participated in the seminar that Texas ABOTA did on implicit bias and race. I participated in a seminar that New York ABOTA did on the 18th Amendment and women's suffrage. And recently, in connection with our meeting in September, the Diversity Committee presented an outstanding video, which I've supplied to your leadership on. It's called Dismiss with Prejudice. And it was about civil law and race. And what we're hoping is that the concept of dismiss with prejudice will be embraced by local chapters. And in your local chapters, you will have a chance to discuss how race affects the practice of law. And I commend you for the work creating the diversity committee that you've created and the work that they've done. Of all the presidents in ABOTA history, I will be the one who's traveled the least. I only made 3 trips as your president to Orange County ABOTA, to Mississippi ABOTA, and to Kentucky ABOTA. One of the things that we've done in ABOTA is that we've tried to work very hard to revitalize the chapters around the country that aren't as good as Michigan is. We've met virtually with Kansas, North Dakota, West Virginia, New Hampshire, and Alaska. And it's interesting, every chapter is different. Every chapter has its own dynamics. And those chapters were very appreciative of the work that we've done for them. We did our first virtual meeting in June. I think it was very effective. We had a very spirited discussion on the issue of whether we should adopt a resolution regarding excessive force and police violence and equality, but it did pass. Also, we had a virtual meeting in September that replaced our Seattle meeting. If we had had the meeting in Seattle, I had a jazz concert planned for Friday night after great dinners, and we were still able to have the jazz concert Friday night with a live presentation by a jazz singer in Seattle, Eugenie Jones. And that concert is on the website, and you can still look at it if you'd like to do it. We have a great executive director in Brian Tyson. The national office has operated remotely, flawlessly. The staff only goes into the office if absolutely necessary, but they've done a great job of adapting to technology. They provided a support system to ABOTA chapters around the country and are available to do so even now. The ABOTA Foundation has in this year, the pandemic conducted 10 masters in trial during the pandemic, Civility Matters, and other programs. Maya Angelou said that every storm runs out of rain, and eventually we'll get past this pandemic. But what's been really special about this year is how chapters like your chapter in Michigan has continued to have great programs. ABOTA chapters around the country have had great programs, and the ABOTA office has functioned flawlessly. I'll always be known as the ABOTA pandemic president, but I think we've had a great year despite the pandemic, and it shows us that we're resourceful and that we can adapt to change, and we can still be a quality organization and present quality programs. Thank you for letting me be with you tonight, and I'll answer questions at the appropriate time. How are you, Chief Justice McCormick?
I am well. Happy to share.
I thank you for participating in our seminar, our webinar on conducting civil trials in the age of the pandemic.
It was
thank
a
you for
pleasure.
doing that.
Yes, it was an honor.
You're muted, Bob.
Bob, you're
Bob,
muted.
I think you're muted.
There
we go.
There we go.
Luther, I wanted to personally thank you. When Tom and I assembled in Charleston for the national meeting, your remarks were inspirational. Tom and I spent time in Charleston restaurants planning and preparing for the upcoming year, largely inspired by your remarks. And I hope our chapter members can appreciate the kind of contributions you made to us just in a short time in Charleston. And our meager efforts are small compared to all that you've done on a national level, and we thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next guest is Chief Justice Bridget McCormick. As you know, individuals of this caliber travel together, and we're very grateful, Chief Justice, for your agreement to participate with us tonight. You've been a dynamic spokesman for the cause of justice, a very visible proponent of that which is best in the legal profession, and we thank you, and our gratitude for your participation tonight is genuine. I'd like to introduce Chief Justice Bridget McCormick to our members and anticipate her remarks. Again, thank you for participating.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation to you and to Tom. It's wonderful to be here, and especially to share the Zoom stage with Luther and Reggie. It is an honor. I look forward, however, to when we can do all this in person, both because I love this particular group of people, but also because it will mean that 2020 is over, which, you know, needs to happen. So many of our neighbors have encountered profound struggle this year with the virus, the economic fallout from the virus, the loneliness, the isolation, from the stress of not knowing when it will all be behind us. And each of us has had to change so much of what we do and how we do it. Also, that's the same for our profession. We've seen more change in 7 months than in 3 decades in courts. Courtrooms, physical courtrooms, look a lot today like they did in 1918. And for lots of reasons, we lawyers and judges have managed to resist change more successfully than most industries. Some of those are cultural, some of those are normative, some of them are even legal. But the pandemic broke the dam. And that part of all of this is actually exciting, in my view. Disruptive change is an opportunity to reimagine what we do from the ground up. And let's face it, we were not nailing it before. Despite our best efforts, we have not figured out how to address the civil justice gap. 8 out of 10 people with civil justice problems in Michigan, like most of the country, can't afford lawyers, and lawyers can't afford to help them. It costs too much, it takes too long. And we're having the most important conversation about the inequities in our justice system in my professional lifetime because of the impossible not to see flaws that we've all seen. Those failures have consequences. The National Center for State Courts collects data every year on the level of public trust and confidence in our branch, and it's declining. And it's disenfranchised communities in particular, and communities of color in particular, where it has declined the most. Since March, Michigan courts have held over 1.2 million hours of Zoom hearings, most streaming to YouTube, so transparency has been enhanced. The public can participate in or watch our justice system at work from their smartphones. Michigan is leading the nation in moving courts online. Our Rapid Response Task Force gave courts quick tools and information to be successful. We conducted an online jury trial pilot just to figure out how it would work. Don't get scared. And we eliminated all barriers to moving what courts do to remote platforms. We stood up in Michigan the very first statewide online dispute resolution program for very small dollar disputes. It's an asynchronous platform that allows people to work with a mediator or without. It's up to them. If they come to a resolution, it enters it in the court where their dispute is happening. They never have to go to court. It is absolutely free. Maybe most importantly, we have unleashed some entrepreneurship, which is kind of exciting. Usually lawyers are the bummers in the entrepreneurs' boardrooms, but all of a sudden we're having to act like entrepreneurs. In Washtenaw County, a local magistrate is working with a local police officer who takes his smartphone to the homeless shelter and clears warrants for anybody who has one and wants to clear it, right from the homeless shelter. And we're still in the middle of all of this. So we have lots of time left to run the experiment, to think about what our legal infrastructure could look like. What would we want it to look like when this pandemic is finally behind us? And with all of the progress we've made in many aspects of what we do, jury trials continue to be the most difficult. The update I have for you is not a great one. In Michigan, at least, we're moving backward in most places right now. That's true in lots of parts of the country. It's going to be a while before we can safely hold jury trials the way we used to at any scale. And I don't have any shortcuts to suggest, but I do want us all to use this time to innovate. We're not going back to where we were. We get to rethink and rebuild, and we can do it in a way that serves all of the public, serves your clients more effectively, more efficiently. So where would you want the system to be? How can we build a justice system that reflects our communities, their priorities, that provides access to everyone and gives everyone confidence that they can solve difficult problems effectively and efficiently? In his book, The Future of Law, Richard Susskind describes a power tool manufacturer training new employees. And what the trainer says is, we don't sell drills, we sell holes. Customers don't care about drills, they want holes in their walls. And likewise, Susskind says, our neighbors who have legal problems don't want lawyers and judges, or even mediators, nor do they care about court rules or the common law. They want a will, or to recover a debt, or to transition their family, or to understand the legal rules before they set up a business, or to be compensated for a loss, to right a wrong, and to accomplish those things without stress and efficiently. They won't care at all, in other words, if we build something that doesn't look like what we used to have. They want to get their problems solved efficiently, effectively, satisfactorily, and without trauma. I recently finished Dan Heath's new book, Upstream, which is about solving complex problems. Heath starts the book with a parable that inspired him to write it, which you may have heard, but here's how he tells it. You and a friend are having a picnic on the bank of a river, and you've just laid down your picnic blankets. You're about to have your meal when you hear a shout from the direction of the river. You look back, and there's a child thrashing around in the water, apparently drowning. So you both dive in, you fish the child out, you bring them to shore. And just as you're starting to calm down, you hear another shout. You look back, there's a second child splashing around again and apparently drowning, and so back in you go. You fish them out, and there are two more children who come along right behind. And so begins this kind of revolving door of rescue where you're in and you're out, fishing kids out, and it's exhausting work. And right about that time, you notice your friend is swimming to the shore, steps out, starts to walk away as though to leave you alone, and you cry out, hey, where are you going? I need your help. All these kids are drowning. And your friend says, I'm going upstream to figure out who's throwing all these kids in the river. Of course, when people's problems end up in court, a lot has gone wrong upstream. We are a very downstream profession, or at least we have been so. But what upstream infrastructure could we build? What could we produce to make a justice system that better serves your clients? How can we apply upstream thinking to what we build? What are those parts of your practice that have always felt the most inefficient, counterproductive even? What supports them? What keeps them in place? How could we do it better? What would be a better way to build it if we were starting on a blank slate? You all assembled here are the leaders in our profession. You can and should be the architects of what we build. You have the experience, you have the knowledge from that experience to lead. And if we build a system that produces more satisfied customers, that will enhance confidence in the justice system and in the rule of law. Thank you for all you already do to deliver more and better justice to our neighbors. Thank you for your example of professionalism, civility, and integrity. Please be bold as we approach what our legal infrastructure looks like as we move out of the storm. I look forward to working with you on any ideas you have. My DMs are open. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to visit with you tonight and for everything else you do.
Justice McCormick, thank you. Here's a commitment from ABOTA to you. The board over the past few years has been committed to reinventing the chapter. Service as a component we view as a requirement and not just an afterthought. We view our commitment to the profession as one of importance, as a priority, and as something that we don't want you to take for granted, or the rest of our legal community to take for granted. Count us in. This board is committed to the activities that you described. We wish you an open door to us and correspondingly an open door the other way. We look forward to working with you and thank you in particular for your remarks tonight to make these points to our members. Thank you very much. Our final speaker, the trilogy, if you will, is Reginald Turner. As you've heard from Luther, mentored by Dennis Archer, but in his own right, an outstanding contributor to the Detroit legal community and now to the national legal community. As president-elect of the American Bar Association, he has a unique position, not just on Michigan, but on our country as a whole. Reggie, we welcome you, appreciate your attendance, and look forward to hearing from you as well.
Thanks, Bob. I also want to thank my partner, Dan Scully, for inviting me to join you this evening, and thank Tom as well for allowing me to be a part of this program. It's an honor to be on a program with Chief Justice McCormick and Luther Batiste. I've known both of them for quite a long time and admired their work in a number of different capacities. Luther's mother-in-law is one of my dear mentors from the time I was growing up. And Luther, you know about the TULC on Grand River in Detroit, where Liz Jackson was essentially the matriarch and mentored lots and lots of people to do great things in our community. Dennis Archer has already been noted as my primary mentor in the legal profession. He first inspired me to join the American Bar Association when I was in law school. And I attended my first ABA meeting as a law student representative at the University of Michigan Law School. Later, I had the privilege of serving as Dennis Archer's law clerk for 2 of his 6-year tenure as a justice of the Michigan Supreme Court. During his tenure on the court, Dennis worked on and ultimately created the very first diversity program for the American Bar Association. It had a very long name, Luther, you remember this, the Commission on Opportunities for Minorities in the Legal Profession. Today, that commission is part of a very, very important diversity center within the American Bar Association, which has 6 different entities in it addressing all types of diversity, not just with respect to race, but also gender, disability. It's a very, very powerful part of the work that the American Bar Association is doing today. And you know, I had the privilege of watching him pull that together again as his law clerk at the Michigan Supreme Court. For the last few months, I've been comparing the stress of the COVID pandemic, the recent law enforcement debacles, and the resultant unrest to the last time I experienced such anxiety, which was the 1967 Detroit riot, also stoked by police brutality. My father was a Detroit police officer during the riot. He was on duty what seemed like 24 hours a day and what seemed like an eternity. I have vivid memories of armored vehicles rolling down the streets of the city of Detroit. Our family could smell the smoke of the burning city from our front porch. After the riot, the police department created a citizens complaint bureau, and my father was promoted to detective in that unit. A short time later, Father William Cunningham, a Catholic priest, and Eleanor Jositis, a Detroit housewife and mother, teamed up with an interracial group of volunteers to found Focus Hope after the '67 riots. They knew they had to help the metropolitan Detroit area face the acute social and moral crisis that gripped the city and its suburbs. The mission of Focus Hope, adopted in March 1968, was both simple and powerful. Recognizing the dignity and beauty of every person, we pledge intelligent and practical action to overcome racism, poverty, and injustice, and build a metropolitan community where all people may live in freedom, harmony, trust and affection, black and white, yellow, brown, and red, from Detroit and its suburbs, of every economic status, national origin, and religious persuasion. We join in this covenant. As a child, I witnessed firsthand the good work of Focus Hope after the devastation of the riot. My family was paired with a suburban family in a cultural exchange program designed to break down some of the racial barriers that led to the riot. The time we spent with the Latanzio family from St. Clair Shores, Michigan, opened our eyes to the importance of diversity. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I told my father that I wanted to be a police officer like him. He smiled, looked down at me and said, "Son, that's very nice, but I want you to be a lawyer like my friend Elliot Hall." And that kind of stuck with me. Over the course of time, I acceded to his wishes. Most respected lawyers distinguish themselves by breathing life into the lawyer's oath. With the powerful words of the oath, we pledge to support the constitutions of our nation and states, to respect our courts and judges, and to practice law with integrity, civility, and concern for both paying and pro bono clients. That last part of the oath is one of my favorites. It says, "I shall never reject from any consideration personal to myself the cause of the defenseless or oppressed, or delay anyone's cause for lucre or malice." Roberts P. Hudson, who was the first president of the State Bar of Michigan, opined that no organization of lawyers shall long survive which has not for its primary object the protection of the public. Accordingly, those who are entrusted with bar leadership must endeavor to be truly representative. The American Bar Association is responding to the call in a variety of ways. We have created a police practices consortium where we now have over 50 law schools across the nation working on issues of police tactics and creating programs to help address some of the issues that we've seen that have created disturbances in cities across our great nation this year. The American Bar Association seeks to increase public understanding of and respect for the rule of law, the legal process, and the role of the legal profession at home and throughout the world. We work for just laws, human rights, a fair and efficient legal system, and meaningful access to justice for all. I'm proud to have served in one of those diversity programs that Dennis Archer created. By the time I was there, it was called the Commission on Diversity in the Legal Profession. And I'm very delighted to know that ABOTA is focusing on diversity and inclusion as well. I look forward to working with you and your colleagues as we seek to promote diversity within our profession and within those organizations and institutions and locations in which we are living or working. And so I hope that ABOTA will continue to partner with the ABA on initiatives that promote the rule of law and the excellence in the practice of law. Thank you very much for having me with you today.
Bob, it's really interesting that Reggie Dennis Archer was the first chair of the diversity committee for ABOTA. He was appointed by Ed Nevin to chair that committee. And it's a small world.
A small world.
The ties and the connections in the legal community are remarkable. And then to assemble here tonight in this context and listen to the connections between the three of you, it is remarkable. But then we tie it together with one individual after another that unites us in ways that we can all be proud and reflect on as part of the blessing of being lawyers in Michigan and tied together in these various ways. Reggie, let me thank you. Your service is appreciated, your remarks are valued, and the work that you have before you goes forward with our blessings and our best wishes for all the accomplishments you seek to generate in your remaining term as president-elect, and then, of course, as the leader of our American Bar Association. We wish you well, and thank you for participating tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
We now have the opportunity to share questions and answers. I'm not sure where we stand on questions. My abilities with the technology, as my children remind me, substandard, but we'll do our best to channel questions to you. Tom, do you have any teed up?
We do. We've got a few questions. Luther, let me first go to you. Many of us are familiar, of course, this year with your article, Now is the Time. And we would ask that you provide us just a little more insight into really what brought you to that point, a point really where perhaps many of us have thought of being, but have never really had the courage to go there. Can you enlighten us a little bit on that?
Well, first of all, you have to know my background. I'm from a small town, Orangeburg, South Carolina, which is located between Charleston and Columbia, where I live now. And I grew up during the age of segregation, during Jim Crow. As a person growing up, I sat in the balconies of movie theaters. I drank from colored water fountains, and I went to segregated schools. I didn't attend an integrated school until I was 18 at the University of South Carolina. So I saw and experienced firsthand overt racism and discrimination. I personally have been the victim of mistreatment by police officers. So when the incident happened with George Floyd and the discussion opened up in this country, which I thought was as healthy as I've ever seen in my 71 years on the planet, I felt just compelled to try to to say something that was thoughtful, but also something that was positive. You know, in ABOTA, we have over 7,600 of the greatest lawyers in the country. And we have our differences, but I think we have more in common than we have in different. And what I tried to do in my remarks was to rely on my history and my background and what I experienced as an African-American growing up in the South, but also, you know, as the first African-American president of ABOTA, to try to be a person that could bring all of us together and try to inspire members of ABOTA to have a dialogue, to have a conversation, and as I said, at this point in time, to be leaders in a discussion about how we can be better, how our legal system can be better, how our country can be better. And that's what I tried to convey in that article.
That was truly inspirational. For those of you who have not had a chance to look at that article, I highly recommend it. It was very moving. Luther, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Justice McCormick, we have a question regarding the challenge that you set forth tonight. Where do you see the role of the trial lawyer in civil justice reform and building infrastructures that reflect the upstream rather than downstream dilemma that you described?
I think you're going to know better than I will. I know a lot about the problems our courts have with adjudicating cases, and especially the district courts, with a significant number of self-represented litigants who try and manage courts without lawyers or simply give up and don't try. Your cases we worry about least of all, because we know you guys are worried about them. So we don't, we spend the least amount of time worrying about your practice, but that's not the right call right now, because right now we do have this opportunity to think about how we can make sure what we have when we come out of this works better for you. What parts of what you're doing now make sense to keep doing this way? What parts clearly don't? You're going to know that better than I am. And I need you all to make sure we're working together on figuring that out. What efficiencies have you learned that, because you've had to, that you'd like to build into rules or norms or processes? I think the point is we shouldn't be waiting to just figure out how we can go back to what we had. That doesn't make any sense. Let's figure out now, what are we learning? What can we measure? What should we be measuring, so that we can figure out how we can serve your clients better when we're done.
Thank you.
Justice McCormick, another question for you. Speak a little bit more about the high cost of hiring a lawyer and how that has a chilling effect on our citizens of this state in terms of getting their disputes resolved.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know this better than I do, but the great majority of people in Michigan with civil legal needs, 8 out of 10 people with civil legal needs, can't afford lawyers to help them with those. So if you're getting evicted, or you're, have a family law issue, a consumer debt issue, pretty important questions that change people's lives, families' lives, pretty significantly. And right now, we either hope those people can manage the court system on their own, or they just don't come. A lot of people who get eviction notices who might have legal defenses just never bother coming to court because they don't understand what a legal defense is or how to even figure that out. One of the things we're seeing in courts doing their business on the Zoom platform is a much higher rate of appearance from those self-represented litigants. That's a huge upside right there, right? Because people who perhaps couldn't figure out transportation or childcare, or even sometimes time off from work. A lot of judges report people in their break room phoning into their hearing. And so we are able to increase access to justice for a significant part of the public that uses our courts. That's a complete upside to what we're seeing. But as you know, there are also other cases where there is, you know, little dispute about liability, but low enough damages that it doesn't make that lawyers can't afford to litigate those cases, right? There's a category of cases that where, but the damage amount that might be too low for a lawyer to be able to afford it can make a tremendous difference in a family or an individual's lives, right? And right now, those folks are falling through the cracks too. We're not doing right by those people in our justice system. And I want to make sure that we take advantage of this once in my lifetime opportunity to address all of those issues.
How can we best work with you and the ideas that you've come across? What's our platform? What's the best way to do that?
So we should figure that out. We have a task force led by 2 judges right now, TJ Ackert in Kent County and Pat Frizard in Wayne County, that is pretty small, and I'm not even sure which state, who the state bar has on it, that's looking at some of this, but I would really like to have your involvement. So we should talk about who you think maybe from ABOTA would be willing to serve, to help us.
We'd welcome that conversation. We really would. I know both of them. That's easy.
Great.
Bob?
Reggie, a question has come in about the ABA's views on these types of court issues. Is there a platform through which the ABA speaks to address the concerns and issues that Justice McCormick just outlined?
The litigation section of the ABA is one of the largest sections in the organization, and it provides continuing legal education programs and advocacy on all aspects of litigation in the courts. And there are a number of subcommittees within the litigation section that address the full panoply of issues that lawyers face, and of course that the public faces in dealing with our courts.
Is there a way for the ABOTA chapter to, Michigan ABOTA chapter, to reference and or participate at some level in that which the ABA does and which it generates in terms of reports, analysis, recommendations, or proposed solution?
Yes, there are programs within the ABA that also address the issues we were talking about earlier, specifically with regard to those who can't afford legal services. And I'm very proud of the work that the ABA does. The Standing Committee on Legal Aid and Indigent Defense is one of the most important pro bono efforts of the American Bar Association. But again, many of the other entities within the ABA have pro bono programs that seek to ensure that justice is accessible for all.
Okay.
And in addition to those access to justice programs, again, they're looking at every aspect of our litigation process on a regular basis and pushing out ABA policy, which ultimately has to be approved by the House of Delegates of the ABA, that addresses the issues that are raised within the various sections and committees.
Bob, we've got another question, Luther, for you. We know that you've been around the country talking about how we conduct trials safely in this pandemic era. We know that ABOTA's drafted a white paper on that topic. Seminars have taken place. I know this is a big question, but can you summarize some of the things that you think will be effective in helping us get to the courtroom sooner?
That is a tough question. You know, as I've gone around the country, different sections of the country have approached this differently. In Florida, for instance, they're doing virtual trials there. Ben Crump, who's noted for his work on police brutality cases, tried a civil case in Florida in the last 2 weeks and got over a $400 million verdict in a case. In Texas, they're very aggressive about trying cases. In some sections of Texas, they're less COVID fearful than other places.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of it depends on the part of the country you're in, the attitudes about COVID. As we know, just from watching television, there are different attitudes all around the country. In the white paper, we talk about basic things about how to handle exhibits, plexiglass between jurors, just the nuts and bolts of it. So I think how we proceed with this will depend on so many factors, but I think where you are will be a big factor in determining how things work. What I've learned from moving around the country is in some areas, criminal trials will take great precedent over civil trials. And some places you won't see civil trials to 2022, they've been told, because of the need to have criminal trials. So it's hard to put it in one clear perspective because the country is so different and how courts approach it is so different around the country.
Mm-hmm. With that response, Chief Justice McCormick, people want to know, when do you suspect our courts will be open for the type of cases that we once held? Any idea?
I mean, we had a number of courts that had progressed to phase 3 of our reopening plans, and there were, you know, some trials around the state. Juries were picked in creative ways. Saginaw in a ballroom, and Traverse City in a high school auditorium, and Ionia in a field house, in Lansing on Zoom, and then courts were able to bring the jurors in and separate them and keep them safe. But I think in almost every one of those places, the courts have gone back to phase 2. And, you know, infections are rising in Michigan and people are not dying as frequently, but that doesn't mean we're gonna, you know, tell them they can take the risk. And the first time we have a juror who turns up sick as a result of serving on one of our trials, we have a big problem. So I don't know. I mean, the public health experts will know better than I will. I'm sorry that I can't answer that.
Tom, I received an email today about a trial in Iowa, and the trial went on for 2 weeks. They were within 3 witnesses of completing the trial, and one of the plaintiff's attorneys tested positive for COVID. The judge declared a mistrial, and they have to start over again.
Yeah, I know. We are beginning to receive notices where we're going to be selecting jurors, at least in one of my cases, in the local gymnasium. Never did I think I would receive a notice to report to a gymnasium to pick a jury, but that is what's happening.
I will say you all have, you know, the criminal cases are the most difficult for us because we have security issues in picking juries off-site. You don't have that. You can pick juries off-site. You can even try cases off-site.
Right.
So, you know, I feel like there's like some innovation and creativity that we should see from this particular bar that I would love to see. Again, if infections are rising, then you might have to get to a place where it's safe in the particular county. But you can innovate, and you should.
It's a great challenge, really is.
There are all these convention centers that are empty. What's
yeah.
that place in Novi that we used to always go to for all our meetings? The show place, whatever it is. Place is totally empty. We should have a trial in every one of those rooms. Get your cases tried in Novi.
That's true. We've got an empty ballroom waiting for this group on December 4th in Dearborn. Who wants the first chance to try a case in Dearborn? I'm just kidding, of course. But
Let
those
me
are
add
excellent
another
thoughts.
topic to the mix before we close. As an observer of the justice system, as someone who samples the pulse of the profession, as someone who interacts with a large number of individuals, one of the most common things I hear is concerns about civility. It is not just a reflection on COVID and the unfortunate lack of community that we share. It is a problem that is a regular discussion point. Each of you, our panelists, brings experiences to this topic. But there are repeated instances now daily about the lack of civility among lawyers. And occasionally it even penetrates our ranks here at ABOTA. And internally, what we try to do is when we learn of an individual member with an issue is to find him or her and have a discussion about the fact that it isn't really acceptable or good practice as quietly and as subtly as we can. But of course, this is like a hand slap because we're just a peer and we can't do much if someone's insistent on poor behavior. Is there a way that we can unite to make professionalism relevant and important again throughout the trial bar? And I would open this question to all three of you.
Civility in our profession is of the utmost importance to me, and I think to all lawyers. You know, whether they practice it regularly or not, they always want the other side to be civil. But I think most lawyers do conform to the expectation of civility. But there are outliers, and the question is, what do you do about that? I think that in many cases, the judge has to be the arbiter of what's appropriate in the courtroom and what's not, and that's clearly within the judge's ability and jurisdiction. The question is whether the court will intervene to ensure that a trial or a hearing is moving forward in a way that comports with the oath we take as lawyers. I revert back to the lawyer's oath quite frequently, and of course we pledge to practice law with civility and integrity in the lawyer's oath. It's not something that should have to be the lawyer should have to be reminded about, in my opinion. And you know, I had the privilege of receiving the Cook-Friedman Civility Award a couple months ago, along with Barbara McQuaid. I think most of you know Barbara. Serving, having the opportunity to work at the court with that group of giants that I named earlier, and the civility that they exhibited. They would often have very different views on the outcome of a particular case, and I know you see this as well, Justice McCormick, in your work. But the court, but the members of the Supreme Court would gather for lunch. The law clerks would gather together from time to time. It was a very, very collegial court, even though they had a very diverse set of political backgrounds and views on particular issues. And I think that tradition has continued over the course of time. There have been a couple periods where maybe not so good, but certainly I think today the court is operating as it did when I had the privilege of serving as a law clerk.
I would just say I agree it's a problem. I think if we loved our neighbor as we love ourselves, we would have less problems. And I think ABOTA says it best with their program, Civility Matters. I just don't understand. I think a lot of times, I had a situation today where a lawyer was very ugly to me in the email. And I think the reason he was ugly was he was trying to impress his client. That somehow his client thought that if he said something mean to me, that indicated that he was doing a good job for the company. But I don't understand it, but it's certainly something that we need to emphasize and talk about. It just makes the practice of law so much harder when people aren't civil to each other. Doesn't have to be that way.
The State Bar, Ed Pappas led a committee that came up with a set of professionalism principles, which it presented to the court, and the court's now considering. They wouldn't, of course, create new rules. You couldn't get in trouble for violating them, but there's something about an aspirational set of principles that we all subscribe to, lawyers and judges, that might be helpful. I support them. So.
One last question we've got from our audience. Are there any scale criteria that exist for resuming trials in Michigan? Chief Justice McCormick, to your knowledge?
Yeah. The court, I mean, we issued, I think, 18 emergency administrative orders between March and June, and one of them was the reopening standards. Every court has to submit a reopening plan to the SCAO, to the Supreme Court, as they move through the 4 phases of reopening. 4 is fully open. Nobody has gotten to 4. A number of courts got to 3. Yeah. But as I said, many of them have moved back to phase 2. The plan is designed to accommodate the differences in local communities. The chief judges have to coordinate with their local health director to be able to move through the reopening phases. Like everything else, we have all of the other orders. The court has a COVID-19 webpage that you can find all of those on. We even have up there each of the courts of the state and what phase they're in, so you can figure out which court is where.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to wrap up with 2 things. First, on behalf of our membership and on behalf of all those who have assembled here tonight, we owe a measure of thanks and appreciation that we cannot adequately express to the 3 of you for joining us. These remarks tonight are important, they're relevant, and in effect, in your own ways, you issued a call for action. It's appreciated, it's welcome, and as I said, I find it inspiring. Thanks to each of you on behalf of the Michigan ABOTA chapter. We look forward to further contact with all of you in different ways and in different issues. But please appreciate our thanks and gratitude for your presence here tonight.
Thank you for all your time. Wonderful.
My second remark is to our members and those who are here tonight. I would say that tentative efforts lead to tentative outcomes. And the call to action that we've listened to tonight is one which our board has appreciated, welcomes in its own discussions, and looks forward to further relevant efforts by the Michigan chapter to address the many issues facing our legal community. And we thank you for participating and attending tonight as well. The board is very grateful to have you as an audience, and we look forward to working with you in the years to come to make the chapter both relevant and important to the Michigan legal community. Thank you for attending tonight as well.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.